I'm going to do something a little different today. God sent me to be a scout from the front lines to tell you about what's happening in the battle in our country on religious liberty. And really, if there's one verse that, really one chapter, but it's particularly one verse that really will nail home a lot of what I'm going to be talking about behind all these stories, it's Joshua 1:9, where the Israelites are on their way into the promised land. God had already told them, I'm giving you the promised land. But yet he had to tell them over and over and over again in Joshua 1, haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Okay, you would think the promise is enough. It's not, right? And so this whole idea about being courageous, you think we live in a culture right now where you have to be courageous, where you have to stand up, where you have to speak the truth, right? I mean, there is all kinds of intimidation in our culture right now. And you're going to see examples of people who are standing for our faith and are really the heroes are all around our country. So let me start with the basics. What is First Liberty, the group I lead? First Liberty is the largest legal nonprofit in the country that all we do is religious freedom. So let's say you're a 5-year-old girl and your name is Gabriela Perez and you are caught praying over your meal at the lunch cafeteria at school. And you were told it's not good to pray at school. And you're a poor family, you live outside of Orlando, you certainly can't hire a group of attorneys. What do? Well, we come in, we bring the best litigators in the country, they all donate their time free of charge, so that when Gabriela wins her case, which we did win Gabriela's case, we don't just win for Gabriela, but we set a precedent that protects all of our kids and our grandkids. And how did I get in this? Back when I was in high school, I knew my gifts were in analytical thinking and speaking, and I thought, well, I either need to be a pastor or a lawyer. And people said, isn't that like a God or Satan choice to be a pastor or a lawyer? And, my youth pastor said, you know what? If you're called to be a minister, that's a wonderful calling. But I will say this. I know a lot of Christian ministers, but boy, we sure could use some more Christian lawyers. Amen. And as I analyzed my DNA to figure out which one I would be better suited for, I kind of realized I might be better at dispensing justice rather than dispensing mercy, so I'd probably make a better lawyer than a pastor. So, I went to law school and, I did well undergrad, but as a law student, I had average intelligence. And yet I had a heart for ministry. So I led the discipleship ministry for the college students at my church while I was in law school. That's really normally a bad idea. You got to spend 24 hours a day in law school. You're in a major competition, and especially if you're average intelligence, that's not the way to do it. But that's the way God had me do it. And when the grades came back, I was making all the high grades. And it was God's way to show me, I want you to keep your heart for ministry, but I want you to do law. And I got out a clerk for a federal judge. You do that for 1 year. You sort of research, write opinions. You get to see what everything's like on the other side of the bench. So after that experience of understanding how it works, what's influential, what's not, what's an over-the-top argument, what's not, all that, every law firm wants you at their law firm. They'll even pay you a big bonus to come there because that's a unique perspective you can add to help the firm. Well, I had all those offers, and I sat in my little clerk's office, and I said, Lord, I just feel like I'd suffocate going and being a regular lawyer. I just don't think that's what you're calling me to do. And I remember just sitting and thinking, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, I want to use my legal skills because God's shown me I should do that, but I want to help pastors and churches and religious freedoms and our founding principles, and I'd even like to go to seminary part-time. And I laughed because there was no paying job of any such thing in the United States. And about 2 weeks later, 2 partners of major different national law firms called me out of the blue. And they said, look, we started donating on our time for religious liberty. And we're getting so many calls now, it's hurting our ability to make a living. So we were wondering, would you be willing to come on and do legal cases and help pastors, churches, religious freedoms, and our founding principles? And you can even go to seminary part-time if you want to. Now, being in my mid-20s, maybe a little immature in my faith, I said, let me pray about it. Like that wasn't the answer to prayer, right? And they said, how much you need to live on? And I was making $28,000 as a federal clerk, and they pitched in out of their pocket, and we started a nonprofit. And 37 years later, First Liberty is the largest legal organization in the country that all we do is religious liberty. It's something God knew that needed to be created. And I always like to start out because, if I ask Christians, is religious liberty important? They go, well, yeah, it's important. But they think it's important just so they can operate their faith. They can exercise their faith. It's so much bigger than that. Our founders understood and called this our first freedom because they understand if you lose this freedom, you will lose all of your freedoms. And I have all the time. In fact, after the first service, when yesterday afternoon or night, whatever you call 4 o'clock service, I had a number of people from other countries come up and tell me the same stories I get all the time, which is, I saw this happen in my country. They took down their religious symbols, and a month later, 2 months later, 3 weeks later, whatever, I lost all my political freedoms. And the reason for that is the one thing that a totalitarian regime will never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. So whenever that type of power starts to coalesce, the first flashpoint is always these people that won't bow their knee to the government. And you know what? We've had our own experience with this just recently in the United States. What happens when you give, in COVID, what happens when you give governors, county commissioners, mayors power that they've never had before? What was the flashpoint in court, right? It wasn't the businesses that were closed, and that was a big issue. It was churches and synagogues, right? It was, you can open the liquor store on the weekend, you can go to Walmart, but you can't go to church. And we won every single COVID case we filed all across the country. But the fascinating thing that I saw in watching this is every single place when we won, within 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, the businesses were opened. There wasn't lawsuits on behalf of the businesses and then the churches were open. The lawsuits were on behalf of the very First Amendment in our Constitution. You know, free speech, free exercise of religion, freedom of assembly, the right of the church to gather. And once we won there, everything else was opened up. And so that being the case, how are we doing in America? Since this is kind of the linchpin for all of our other freedoms, how are we doing? Well, I mean, I probably don't have to tell you, we're under a lot of attacks. It increases every year. We had 417 cases last year. We have 110 going right now. And it's not, you know, and they're more outrageous, the types of cases. I mean, I've got a whole batch of cases right now that we've never had before of pastors being criminally prosecuted for doing what Jesus would have them do. Take Chris Avell, good example. This is a pastor in Ohio. And he's right now sentenced to 60 days in jail. For what? What did he do? Did he do something really bad? Because he would not lock the doors of his church at night when it was in Ohio, it was negative 30 wind chill, and there were people outside of his church on the street. There was no room for them in the homeless center. 60 days in jail. And they said, well, you're not licensed to be a homeless center. He said, I'm not a homeless center. He said, but Jesus doesn't lock the doors of his church. And for that, 60 days in jail. I've got pastors in, I think, Gethsemane in Arizona, that criminal charges against them for feeding people who were starving. Okay? This is stuff we didn't used to have to worry about in the United States, but we do. Just the right of the church, even to be the church. We have synagogue cases all over the country. Synagogues that just want to be synagogues, right? Rabbi Herzl's a great example of this, and we've got a lot like this. But in his community, they have land. They want to build their synagogue. Well, you know what? They're allowed to build anything you want on that land. You can build a house, you can build your business, you can build a church. There's only one thing you're not allowed to build: a synagogue. Why? Well, we don't have to guess. They had a meeting. It was all public. Because we don't want those kind of people in our neighborhood. And you think, how could you say that in the United States, right? It can't get any worse than that. Well, look at the next thing they said on this slide. So this is going on in the United States, not some, former Nazi country or whatever. In the United States, we have synagogue cases all across the country. But it's not just churches, and it's not just synagogues, it's also in the workplace. We have cases all across the country with people who are being fired just because of their faith. Valerie Klosterman's a great example. 20 years as a physician's assistant, loves people, great physician's assistant, perfect record for 20 years. But then the University of Michigan comes in and takes over her clinic. And the first thing that happens to her is she's pulled into the DEI office and begins to be grilled about her beliefs about all these different things. And when she answers biblically about her beliefs about transgenderism, they called her evil, they cursed her, and they fired her. Had nothing to do with anything she had done in her patients or with her work, but all because of her beliefs. That's totally illegal. It's against the law all across the country. But we're seeing that. Right? It's not just the workplace, it's in the schools. And I could give you lots of examples. I mean, Tons of examples. You probably know this with kids at school and what they're having to go through. I'll just give you a real typical one, which is Laura Walker, a little 11-year-old girl. All she wanted to do is have a club. They had clubs at school. She wanted a club where everybody could come together and pray. What a horrible thing, right? To come together. She said, I don't care how many, what grade, just everybody who wants to come together and pray. They said, no, you can't have that club. The day they made that decision, they put posters all throughout the school of a brand new club called the Pride Club. You could have the Pride Club, but you can't have the Prayer Club. Well, she stood her ground, and as you see, in fact, she was so good on the media that our media team has talked to her parents about as soon as she gets 18, they want her on our media team. And she won, and she had 25 other young kids with her praying at her very first meeting because she stood up. So good for her. But kids shouldn't have to be fighting this. This shouldn't be going on in the schools. They should have religious freedom. It should be treated like any other group. And it's not just at schools with the kids, it's with parents. I mean, the authority of parents over their children. There's lots of cases on this. Probably a good example as any of ours is the Encina's case we have. This is a case where the teachers in their training were told not to tell the parents what they were doing with their kids at school. They told all these fifth graders, part of their assignment they were graded for was they had to read a book to their kindergarten buddy, which asked them to question their gender. Well, a number of these kids said, I have a problem with this. And they went home to their parents and they said, this violates what I believe. And so the parents go to the school and they say, look, number one, you should notify us if you're going to do something like this. These are young children. These are our children. They said, number two, obviously our kids have religious objections and there's no way you should be forcing people to do something that violates their faith. So we're asking for a religious exemption. The school's answer was, you don't have a right to notification and there are no exemptions. So we had to go into federal court to decide who is the authority over parents in this country. Well, I got the answer. Our children aren't children of the state. They're children of the parents. The parents make the decisions for what's best, what their religious and moral upbringing is, not some well-intentioned bureaucrat. And so, again, we're in California in this case. Liberal judge, liberal everything. The judge ruled this is a violation of the law. Parents do have the authority. They do have a right to notice. And certainly there's a religious freedom right for these kids to be exempted even if the parents weren't notified, no matter what. And so, you'd think, well, is that over? No, they've appealed because they want to make sure they are the authority over the children. So these are the battles going on, right? But it's not just in the schools also. It's also in the military. We had to form a whole division just for protecting people in the military and their religious freedoms. And, one of the most recent cases, probably well known, is Chaplain Truby. He actually had a police officer come to arrest him during his sermon. Why? Because he was preaching on Romans 1. And they were like, well, you're not allowed to preach on Romans 1. He said, excuse me, I'm a chaplain. Okay? They issued a letter of reprimand in his file. If you know much about the military, a letter of reprimand means you're done. And so, now, fortunately, the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs is a guy by the name of Doug Collins, a former Baptist minister, a former chaplain, and an attorney who was also in Congress and also a friend of ours. And when we sent the legal action to him, we got this letter back where he said the letter of reprimand was, quote, made in error. And he said, to the extent there are any new policies with regard to religious freedom, consider them rescinded. We will be following the United States Constitution and the statutory protections that are afforded to all of our chaplains. So some of you are like, man, I usually come to church and I get really uplifted, but this is kind of depressing stuff. So let me tell you the good news. The good news is we have a method of dealing with this. We've been doing it a long time, and it's really the body of Christ method, and it's working. And that is, if you look at legal nonprofits, and I don't care what their issue is, left wing, right wing, whatever it is, they have the same model. Raise as much money as you can raise. Use that money to hire as many attorneys as you can. Put them in an office in D.C. or L.A. or New York, and then fly them around the country and cover as many cases as you can cover. That is not our model. Our model is there's all these believers who went to law school because they wanted to stand for what was right. You know, they wanted to ride in on the white horse with a saber and save the day for righteousness. And, 30 years later, these are the best, most powerful lawyers at the most powerful law firms in the country. And they've done honorable work for their clients, but they've never gotten to do a case for the kingdom. So we go and we sit down with them and we say, look, if we bring to you everything you need, on our staff are all top of their class from all the best law firms in America, and all they do is religious freedom. These are media cases. We got a whole media division that will come around you and help you in this case. We'll pay all your out-of-pockets, all your expert fees, whatever it is. If we bring you what you need, will you bring yourself and your law firm free of charge? They're like, man, I've been waiting 35 years. Sign me up. You can imagine when they get that first case how that feels. For the first time in their life, all their talent, all their gifts, all their training lined up with their faith, their love for their country, lined up with the kingdom. They have never felt that before. It's kind of unfair, but we now know we have them for the rest of their lives as one of our volunteer attorneys, because they're going to do another one of these and another one of these. And they're the big partners, so they give cover to the younger attorneys who now get to do one of these. And once they taste, they're going to be doing these. So if you were to go through the top 100 law firms in the United States, most of those firms don't just donate their time with us, they'll fight each other over who gets to donate their time with us. And the result of this is twofold. And one was my idea, the other was the Lord's. Mine was, hey, I think we can get a lot more bang for our buck if we do this. Sure enough, average case, every $10,000 we spend, we get $60,000 donated. It's like a 6-to-1 multiplying of the resources. So it's like God with the loaves and the fish, just multiplying his resources, right? But what I didn't count on was the win-loss ratio. If you look at these nonprofits that are created, they're created, these legal nonprofits, to fight big problems, industry, government, et cetera. So if they win a case, it's a big deal. If they win like 40% of their cases, that's incredible. Our win rate every single year for 26 years in a row has been above 90% every year. And that's God's favor, but it's also, this is his method. I mean, we have the biggest law firm in the United States. It's called the Body of Christ. Our lawyers are everywhere. And we could put a team of the most powerful lawyers in the country together anywhere in the country in 30 minutes. And it's a blessing to them. They get to use their gifts. It's a blessing to the clients who could never afford $2,500 an hour attorneys. And it's a blessing to the whole body because these victories protect everybody in the body of Christ. It is a beautiful example of how the body of Christ is supposed to work. So it also leads to huge victories, right? I mean, the Navy SEALs case, one of the biggest wins maybe in the military ever. This is, of course, during the vaccine mandate when a lot of people were ordered to take the vaccine and many had religious objections to it. We were in the process of losing 30 to 50,000 military families. I mean, some of our very best warriors. Well, the SEALs wanted to be the tip of the spear like they usually are. 35 guys stepped forward and said, I'm not taking the vaccine. I can't. It violates my faith. They took away their pension. They said, we're taking away your pensions, everything you've worked for. We're going to take away all your medical insurance, including for your disabled children. A lot of them have traumatic brain injury because of what they do for us. One of them was on his way to see the doctor. They called the doctor and said, don't see him. This is the kind of stuff they were doing to these guys who'd given everything for our country. But you know what? They stood, and as soon as we got into court, because there are federal laws that protect people in the military, there's a process they have to go through to try to accommodate people's religion. And they didn't do that. They just started punishing them and violating the law. And so when we got into court, the judge threw everything at the federal government for what they were doing. They said, how dare you? There is no COVID exception to the United States Constitution and to federal law. And issued an injunction protecting them. We then converted that into a class action, protect everybody in the Navy. That led to a lawsuit with everybody in the Air Force, with everybody in the Marines. By the time we were over and we had won, we stopped about 30 to 50,000 military families from being thrown out of our military. Some of our best people, very best people. And this is important because people who join our military, they're people of faith. They need to rely on their faith in the military. And I had a hero, General Boykin, who was head of Delta Force, and came to me after this. He said, this case is about whether our military is going to be over. He said, because I'm telling you right now, I've got 4th, 5th, 6th generation families that are in the military, and they're telling their kids, don't do it. I can't tell you what they're going to try to force you to do. He said, you have to win this case. So this case was about whether we have religious freedom in our military, and now you're seeing what's happening with people coming in the military. It's a whole new approach, really important. So normally I would tell you, hey, that's all I got to say. The attacks are growing, but we're winning, okay? God's on our side. The country's built on religious freedom. But then about 5 years ago, God started to do something pretty dramatic, something I had never seen. I've been doing this for 37 years. And really it started back, with 2 elections ago, because we're nonpartisan. Whoever's in office, we're going to push religious freedom. And we thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Most people did. And then this Donald Trump guy won. And we're like, we got to analyze out of all the options, what can we do that would be the greatest impact on religious freedom under this administration? And we immediately saw 132 federal judicial seats that were open, which is really rare. These are lifetime appointments to be federal judges. We thought, one case is important. One judge is hundreds of cases. Hundreds of judges is thousands of cases. And we just felt God pushing us. You need to start vetting all these judges and making sure you get all the information out on who wants to follow the Constitution and who wants to protect religious freedom, which is part of their job. And you know what? When you do that, 234 judges later, it starts to change the opinions that start coming out. And so, for instance, Supreme Court, there's about 7,000 to 8,000 requests for them to take a case a year. Last year, they took 56. So if you think you're going to get your case before the Supreme Court, the odds are not very good. Well, a few years ago, we got not one case, not 2, not 3, 4 wins at the Supreme Court on religious freedom in 13 months. And the 3 of these were what I would call landmark, literally shifting of 50 years of law in favor of religious freedom. First was Carson versus Macon. This is a case out of Maine where for 130 years, they don't have public schools in most of their school districts. So they just give the money for school to the parents and say, you pick the school that you think is best, public or private, anywhere. Well, after about 100 years, they thought, we're going to make one change. You can pick any school you want as long as it's not a Christian or religious school. We went to the Supreme Court and said that's unconstitutional. The court agreed with us 6-3, and now, going forward, every school choice program in the country, Texas just passed one, all over the country they're passing these, it will never be allowed to tell a parent that they can't pick the Christian school for their kids. That's a huge victory for education and the future of our country with regard to religious freedom. Second case is a case called Groff. Gerald Groff was a missionary, came off the mission field, and he said, I got to pick a job because he has really strong beliefs about not working on Sundays. And so he picked the Postal Service, be a mail carrier. But then all of a sudden, it worked great for 2 years, and then the Amazon started delivering on Sundays. And they came in and they said, you're going to have to work on Sundays. He said, I can't do that. Well, normally they have to follow this federal law that says religious freedom in the workplace and accommodation if you can do it. But 50 years ago, 47 years ago, in a really dishonest case at the Supreme Court, they reinterpreted all the words of that protection to write it out of existence. And so we went to the Supreme Court on behalf of Gerald, and we did something a little unusual. We said to the court, this decision from 47 years ago was a lie then, and it's a lie now. This is not what these words mean, and this is not what these words mean. The court ruled 9-0 in our favor, restoring religious freedom protection in the workplace. Every single person, hundreds of millions of people, now have religious freedom in the workplace. All of our kids, all of our grandkids, all in the future. This is a really, really crucial. You can think back just not too long ago in the corporations. If you were a Christian, you were in danger. The stuff that was being pushed through, well, now every one of those people have protection. So a huge victory. And then the third is a case you probably heard of, the Coach Kennedy case. Coach was in the Marines for 20 years, decided to go coach, and he made one promise to God. He said, after every game, the first thing I'm going to do, win or lose, I'm going to go to the 50-yard line, and I'm going to go to a knee by myself, and I'm going to thank you for the privilege of coaching these young men. And so that's what he did for 7 years, until they came to him and they said, if you go to a knee again, we're going to fire you. And he's like, well, what did I fight in the Marines for? I fought to protect our Constitution. He said, what am I if I run as soon as I get any resistance? What kind of example am I for these boys? So he went to a knee and they fired him. And unfortunately for him, he lives outside of Seattle, not a very friendly venue for religious freedom. And lost all the step of the way, all the way through the Court of Appeals, everything. But when we got to the Supreme Court, 6-3, they ruled in his favor. And I think most people know Coach Kennedy can go back, and he did, go to a knee after the football game and pray. And this is a victory for every coach, for every teacher, and their right to live out their faith without the government trying to shut them down. But what's even more important is what was in that decision. We have an establishment clause because our founders didn't want us to establish a national church. Many of them had run from that in the other countries. But 50 years ago, in a case called Lemon, it was aptly named. It's a lemon of a case. They said, no, we think it means more than just that. We think it means that normally you can't bring a lawsuit if you're offended, but we'll allow people to start bringing lawsuits if they're offended by religion. And we think it means that anywhere government is, religion can't be. Well, government's everywhere. And this is a way to push religion into the corners of society. And so if you wonder, what happened with all these cases where we can't have nativity scenes and we can't have menorahs in Hanukkah and we got to roll the Ten Commandments in the closet, and if some kid mentioned something about their faith or Jesus, or like we had 2 weeks ago, there's a talent show, and then when a couple of kids wanted to sing a Christian song, it's like a controversy. Why? Because any of this stuff is in the Constitution? No. Because of this Lemon case. And over 50 years, it was cited over 7,000 times to crush religious freedom and religious expression. Well, in the Coach Kennedy case, about 3 or 4 pages in, they say, Lemon is over. It's reversed. It's dead. And I just want you to understand what that means. Everywhere in this country where crosses went down, they can come back up. Everywhere 10 Commandments puts in the closet, it can come back out. Nativity scenes at Christmas all across our lawns. Menorahs for Hanukkah. I mean, we're religious people with a religious background. We should have religion all across the country. It reminds us that there's something bigger than us that maybe would bind us in morality. Instead of the naked public square, which is like a Marxist, really it leads to incredible evil. But things are changing. This is a huge shift. 7,000 citations gone overnight. Okay? God is totally shifting the landscape of our country. He is changing our future. He's changing our culture. I mean, this is really big. This is what I can say, and we're just at the beginning of this. We're going to win a lot more of these. We've got a lot of targets we have to restore religious freedom to what our founders really wanted for us at the beginning, and it's been really pulled back through about 50 or 60 years of really dishonest opinions. This is a huge, huge victory, right? This is something the Lord's doing, and that most people have no idea. They're slowly learning. You watch. You look around right now. Texas just passed the 10 Commandments law. Is it okay for the kids to learn the 10 Commandments and their place in our history and our tradition of our country? It wasn't in the past because, you don't want to go near religion. That's part of who we are. You're not going to understand America if you don't understand that. And so you're going to see these changes. Look at Christmas. You're going to start seeing more nativity scenes. You're going to start seeing more the fact of who we are as a country. And it's okay to be public with your faith, right? That's a big change. So the thing about it is, though, I was reading along with this, and a lot of these. How did these things happen? How did all these victories happen? Because people were willing to stand up who were believers, right? I mean, it would never happen if they weren't willing to stand. If they just back down, it doesn't work. So I was reading across this scripture recently. I was going through Revelations. And as I was looking at it, I said, whoa, I had never seen this before. The first part we all look forward to, and that is, he who was seated on the throne said, I'm making everything new. Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. Man, that's what we're looking forward to, right? But then now look at the next part. But By the way, you want to make sure you're in one of these camps and not the other, okay? But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexual immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, the liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This list, I was like, whoa. Okay, the murderers, the vile. What's the first in the list? The cowardly. Okay, and it's not the unbelieving, because that's the next word. This is people who know better, and they're cowardly. And I was like, wow. You know, it doesn't do any good to know everything in this book if you're not willing to walk in it. Okay? And we're never going to know the blessings in our life if we don't walk in where God's telling us to go. And the enemy will always use fear. And if you're not willing to walk through fear, you will not experience the blessing that God has for you. And we think a lot of times it's because, well, I'm not really powerful. I can't really do anything. That's a lie. It's a lie straight from the pit of hell. So let me give you an example. I could give you lots of them. I'm going to give you Gail Blair. Gail was slowly going blind. And she used to witness to people as a nurse because she got to care for people. And now she's blind. She said, what am I supposed to do? I'm in an apartment across the street from the park. I can't work. I'm blind. She said, that's it. I'll go down every day with my cane. I'll find my way across the street into the park. I'll sit at a bench, and if somebody will talk to me, I'll offer them a copy of the Gospel of John. And that's what she did. Until a police officer came to her apartment and told her she was banned from the park for sharing her faith for 2 years and the public library. And so this is her story. Watch this with Gail Blair.
Nursing was it for me. It was my identity. I did everything. If I could help them get a job or an apartment, my husband says that I am a frustrated social worker. January 7th, 1984, I actually had been going to a Bible study on the book of John, and it opened my heart to the Word of God being the answer, the truth. It was the best day of my life. I actually was born with a genetic disorder, retinitis pigmentosa, and I still continued nursing until I couldn't anymore because of my vision loss. If somebody ever said to me, hey, you could have your eyesight, but you have to, get rid of Jesus, I'd say, no deal. Wherever I go, I try to hand this out to people. So it's 21 chapters of the gospel. I get around with my cane to cross the street, to go in the park. Going into a park to talk with people is a pleasure, first of all, but knowing that eternal life is real and people don't know that they're in danger, people have been saved in the park. I've had more of a reaction from the staff in the park that was not too nice, like they would interrupt me. There's plenty of people to talk to. I don't have to be going after anybody. I couldn't. It would be a tripping hazard for me. I was sitting on a bench with a man that I was conversing with. The executive director comes over and he says that he was going to call the police. And that's the start of the 2-year ban, even from the library, which that was a little bit of a surprise to me, that they would ban me from both the park and the library on passing out one of the 66 books of the Bible that you have in your library that people can check out. I guess my heart is broken, that I can't do what the Lord has told me to do. So if you want to say that I think about daily the lost souls, I think the Lord has positioned me right across from the park. It's a divine assignment that I absolutely need to fulfill. It's just a must.
So we won Gail's case, and I think it was a week or 2 weeks later, I got an email. Already brought another one to the Lord. So, what kind of power does Gail have? She has the power that created the universe is what she has. And we all do if we're obedient, right? And the enemy is going to try to intimidate us. And so we have been given the greatest gift in this country of religious freedom. So many of our brothers and sisters around the world can't even meet like this. It's illegal. And so given that gift and that stewardship, what are we going to do? And you might say, what can I do? Well, number one, you can pray. When Coach Kennedy was in the Supreme Court, I'd have loved it if you were all praying for him. We just got a case that the court just took, the Supreme Court, just July 3rd. That'll be the first time in probably 40 years we've had a case about the right to share the gospel in a public park. Man, I'd love it if everybody here was praying when we go into that court. And you won't know if you don't get the information as to what's going on. So we got a QR code. So you're welcome to take out your phone and do the camera and get that. And you can sign up. And every Friday we send out an email on the 4 or 5 biggest battles on religious freedom that are happening that week in the country. And I would love for you, when you see that, if God brings some, I want to pray for that family, or I want to pray for that child, or I want to pray for that case or that argument. I'd love for you to do that. Secondly, I'd love for you to tell other people. So many people are intimidated because they don't know we're women. We're winning these cases. And they don't know they can do these things. And if you get these every week and you see these wins and you share that with others, I want you to be the Paul Revere of your friends, to share the word so that people will become emboldened that they can do these things, that they can live out their faith, they can share with other people. That's really important. Oh, by the way, if for some reason the QR code doesn't work, or if you just want to be safe, or if you don't like technology, we have cards like that. We'll have a desk out there. My son would normally be doing that desk. He was a member of this church before I was, and has a small group, and he leads a group that we call F3, the Future of Faith and Freedom. It's for the 20s to 40-year-olds. They're the ones with the kids in school. They're in these battles. They need to know what their rights are, and it's incredible how that group is growing, so you can get information on that as well. And the third thing I would say to do is just to stand, right? Where's God calling you to stand? Where's God calling you to make a difference? I mean, I wondered at first, why is God doing all this? Why is he shifting the law in such a dramatic way for the first time I've seen in 37 years? Is it going to just get so hostile that we need the protection, or is a revival coming? And as I'm watching, I think we see the seeds of a revival coming, right? There are all kinds of things happening, and the stats even tell us this. I mean, for the first time in the history of our country, there are more young men going to church now than young women, okay? There is a movement happening if you look around the country. And so I think we're at the beginning of this. So, there's a great, I don't know if you like the Lord of the Rings. I love the Lord of the Rings. Love the movies most, but even the TV series afterwards, they did. But there's a scene there that I think is such an analogy to what we're going through now. And that is, it's kind of like a drone goes up. There's incredible evil throughout the land. There's darkness. As the drone sort of goes up and starts moving across the earth, it looks hopeless because all you see is vegetation that's dead, like soot. You see evil. You see, no life. But eventually, after a long time of the drone going, in the distance you could see a light. And as it gets closer, you see that what this is, it's a cavalry of warriors on their horses galloping at full speed towards the darkness. And in the very front is Gandalf, the Christ figure, with a white hair, white beard, white cape, white horse, white staff with a light on the end. And everywhere the light hits the darkness is decimated, and life comes back, and green comes back. And I thought, what a picture. There's been some incredible darkness, but God is doing something very dramatic that we've never seen. Every American alive right now has more religious freedom than they've ever had in their lifetime. And it's incredible. God's at work, right? But my favorite part of that imagery was, we don't even have to be on the front horse. Christ is on the front horse. He's just asking us to do one thing: mount up.
Hey, thank you for watching the Anchor Church YouTube channel. I want you to subscribe so that we can let you know when we go live and when we post new content. Make sure to leave a comment and let us know what ministered to you today. Also, let us know where you're watching from and how we can pray for you. Finally, if you'd like to support Anchor right now, you can click the link below and your partnership will help impact so many others. I'll see you next time, my friend. God bless you and best ahead.